The fake HOA cops strutted up the driveway like they owned the entire block, puffing their chests out beneath dollar store uniforms that looked 2 washes away from falling apart. They carried cheap clipboards as if they were sacred scrolls of law, their mirrored sunglasses catching the last rays of sun while they wagged their fingers at my wife for daring. Yes, daring to trim the rose bush without proper approval. My wife, who has lived on this street longer than anyone and has kept those roses alive through 3 hurricanes and 1 blackout summer, laughed in their faces. That laugh must have cut deeper than she intended, because one of them, the shorter one with the flimsy mustache that looked glued on, suddenly raised his hand and slapped her cheek like a scene from some low-budget soap opera. The sound echoed in the cold sack, and every curtain in every window seemed to twitch as neighbors peeked out, hungry for drama. Time slowed, or maybe it only felt that way, because I was already stepping out of the garage, holding nothing but a half-drunk bottle of water, my flip-flops smacking the pavement like war drums. The imposters didn't notice me at first. They were too busy puffing up their chests, congratulating themselves on enforcing neighborhood law. But when my shadow fell across them, longer and darker than their fragile authority could handle, they turned. One smirked, as if to say, "What are you going to do about it?" That smirk vanished the second his eyes landed on the trident tattoo inked across my forearm. The mark I never brag about, the one I earned in the cold black water years ago. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. I just looked at them, calm and steady, the way you look at a storm you know is coming, but you're already prepared for. The taller one tried to stammer something about rules and regulations, but the words cracked in his throat. My wife, still rubbing her cheek, stood tall and smiled now, because she knew what they didn't hide. I don't fight out of anger, I fight when duty calls. And right now, duty had arrived disguised as 2 clowns in fake badges. In one motion, I reached out, plucked the clipboard from the shorter one's hands, and snapped it like a breadstick. The taller one stepped back, tripping over the curb, his sunglasses sliding down his nose in perfect comedic timing. Gasps came from behind the curtains, whispers rolling across the street like wind through dry leaves. The imposters suddenly looked less like enforcers and more like children caught playing dress up, faces pale, legs trembling. Their bravado collapsing faster than their cheap polyester shirts. I didn't have to hit them. Not really. The fear alone did most of the work. And as they stumbled back, muttering threats about reporting us, I simply took my wife's hand, kissed her cheek where the slap had landed, and said, loud enough for every neighbor to hear, "Nobody touches my family." The silence that followed was thicker than any gavel strike in a courtroom. The garage door creaked upward with the slow, steady hum of an old motor, and the sound alone was enough to draw every eye on the street. The fake HOA cops, still gloating over their imagined victory, didn't even bother to turn around at first. They were too busy lecturing my wife, wagging their clipboards like sacred relics, as if the power of neighborhood bylaws flowed through the plastic. But the air shifted the moment my sandal hit the driveway. It wasn't loud, just a soft slap of rubber on concrete, yet somehow it cut through their chatter like a warning bell. My shadow stretched long across the pavement, swallowing their sneakers, climbing their legs, and painting them in darkness they hadn't earned the right to stand in. When they finally turned, their bravado faltered, and for a heartbeat they froze. I stood there in nothing but board shorts, a faded T-shirt, and flip-flops, holding a half-empty water bottle, but none of that mattered. The sun glinted off the tattoo etched into my forearm, a trident, sharp and unmistakable, a quiet testament to years of training and nights spent in salt water colder than their courage would ever know. Their smirks wavered. The taller one, with his bargain bin aviators, tried to size me up like he was still in charge, but his lips tightened when he realized the calm in my eyes wasn't bravado. It was certainty. The kind of certainty you only earn when you've walked into storms and crawled out stronger. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I just took a slow sip of my water, let the silence hang heavy, and met their gaze like I was measuring the distance between me and two paper targets. My wife, still standing tall despite the sting on her cheek, tilted her chin, a flicker of amusement crossing her face. She knew what they didn't, that I didn't need fists or weapons to win this battle. All I needed was presence. The shorter one cleared his throat, his voice cracking as he tried to muster authority. "Sir, we're enforcing the HOA code. Your wife's actions, are out of compliance." He sounded like a boy reciting a speech in class, the words stumbling over themselves, empty of conviction. My silence was louder than any rebuttal. I shifted my weight, just slightly, and his clipboard rattled in his hands. The taller one finally tried to step in, mumbling something about regulations and penalties, but the words faltered when my gaze locked onto him. His jaw twitched, and his shoulders sank, as if the weight of every bad decision in his life had just pressed down at once. Behind them, the neighborhood had gone utterly still. Curtains barely moved, faces hidden but eyes wide, the whole block waiting to see what would happen next. And in that stillness, I let the truth settle in their bones. They weren't the enforcers here. They weren't even players. They were trespassers in a game they didn't understand, standing face to face with a man who had survived storms that would have broken them in seconds. The taller one shifted first, though it was more a stumble than a step, like a man realizing too late he'd wandered into a lion's den. His sunglasses slipped lower on his nose, revealing wide, darting eyes. The shorter one tightened his grip on the clipboard, knuckles whitening, as if the thin slab of plastic could shield him from what was coming. I took a single step forward, and the sound echoed like thunder in the hush of the Col D. Sac. My wife didn't move. She didn't have to. She'd seen this before, not in driveways or suburban streets, but in the way I carried myself, even when the world tried to break me. The clipboard came up, aimed like a shield, and I almost laughed. My hand darted forward, fast but controlled, and I snatched it away before he even realized he'd lost it. The plastic cracked in my grip, snapping into two jagged pieces, fragments falling to the pavement like brittle bones. The shorter man gasped, stumbling back, eyes darting to the fragments as though watching the symbol of his pretend authority dissolve before his very eyes. The taller one lunged then, a sloppy, desperate shove meant more for show than for damage. He wasn't prepared for what happened next. My legs swept out in one clean arc, a move honed through hours of practice in places far deadlier than this cul-de-sac. His balance vanished. He toppled backward into the neighbor's azalea bushes, legs flailing, arms reaching for anything solid, but finding nothing. The branches clawed at him, tearing little holes in his cheap polyester uniform, leaving him tangled and gasping like a fly in a web. The shorter one panicked. He tried to turn, to run, but momentum was against him. A quick palm to his chest, not hard, just enough, sent him stumbling back. His sunglasses launched from his face, spinning through the air before landing perfectly on the driveway, lenses skidding and cracking. The moment stretched, absurd and cinematic, the neighbors' muffled gasps and chuckles seeping from behind their curtains. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. He scrambled to his feet, wild-eyed, his bravado shattered as surely as his shades. My stance never changed. Shoulders loose, eyes calm, I watched him like a predator watches prey, every ounce of fear draining from his face into the pavement. My wife smirked then, the faintest curl of her lips, like she'd just witnessed a magic trick she'd already known the secret to. The man in the bushes groaned, finally untangling himself, bits of leaves clinging to his uniform, dignity shredded. He looked up at me from his leafy prison, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't anger or defiance. It was recognition. He knew, both of them knew, that this had never been a fight. It had been a reminder, swift, precise, and unforgettable, that some lines are never crossed without consequence. And in that moment, standing barefoot on my driveway, I didn't need medals, didn't need a uniform. I needed only to show them the truth. Family is my battlefield, and no imposter survives crossing it. The whole neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting to see if the fake cops would find their courage or crumble completely. The man in the bushes was still flailing, his polyester sleeves snagging on thorns, the bright pink azalea blossoms sticking to him like confetti after a parade he never earned. His partner stood frozen, chest heaving, eyes darting left and right, as if searching for an exit that didn't involve running past me. From behind curtains and half-open blinds, the audience grew. A flicker of a face here, the glow of a phone screen there, neighbors recording, whispering, ready to pass the story along like wildfire at the next block barbecue. Then the short one cracked first. His bravado dissolved, replaced by frantic, bumbling excuses. This isn't over. We'll write you up. You'll be hearing from the, council. His voice cracked on the last word, the syllables breaking apart like his pride. He backed up, tripping over the curb, flailing to keep his balance as laughter bubbled from somewhere down the street. The sound emboldened the crowd behind the curtains. A chuckle here, a muffled snort there. The tension snapped, replaced with an energy electric and giddy, the kind that only comes when bullies get what's coming. The taller one finally wrestled himself out of the azaleas, scratches on his arms, petals tangled in his hair, his uniform now more floral arrangement than authority. He staggered upright, brushing himself off as if he could salvage dignity from the wreckage, but the effect was pitiful. My wife, arms crossed, raised a brow at him, the faint smile on her lips twisting the knife deeper. He saw it too, that smirk, and his face flushed crimson. You don't know who you're messing with," he shouted, but the power was gone from his voice. It cracked halfway through, turning his threat into more of a plea. We'll report this." I didn't move, didn't even blink. I just took another step closer, slow and steady, like the tide rolling in. Their eyes widened. Their feet moved without permission, shuffling backward, away from me, toward the safety of their dented sedan parked crooked at the curb. The whispers from the houses grew bolder. Someone clapped once, sharp and loud, then stifled a laugh. A kid somewhere yelled, "Get him, Mr. Navy," and the shorter faker flinched like the words were a gunshot. They scrambled now, dignity abandoned, tripping over themselves as they tried to retreat with whatever scraps of authority they thought they still carried. They reached the car and nearly fought each other to get inside, one slamming the passenger door shut before the other's leg was fully in. The engine coughed, roared, and the sedan peeled out, tires squealing as though the sack itself was spitting them out. When the noise faded, silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was charged, alive, filled with the unspoken agreement of an entire street. Curtains swayed, blinds tilted, and slowly, faces emerged, neighbors stepping onto porches, smiling, shaking their heads, clapping softly as if they'd just witnessed the main event of a prize fight. The HOA fakers were gone, but their humiliation lingered in the air like smoke after fireworks. And I stood there, hand in my wife's, letting the neighborhood drink in the sight, not of violence, not of rage, but of two pretenders exposed and a family unbroken. The fake HOA cops were gone, their dented sedan's squeal still echoing faintly at the end of the street. But the air they left behind was charged, humming with a strange energy. Neighbors trickled out of their houses one by one, emboldened now that the danger had scurried away. First came Mr. Benson from across the street, still in his bathrobe and slippers, clapping slow and steady like he'd just witnessed a performance worthy of standing ovation. Then the Ramirez kids burst from behind their screen door chanting, "Seal! Seal! Seal!" as if the Cole D. Sack had transformed into a schoolyard coliseum. Phones were everywhere, glowing screens angled at me, at my wife, at the fragments of broken clipboard scattered like battlefield debris. The buzz of whispers rose, punctuated by laughter and the occasional cheer, and for a moment, it felt less like a suburban street and more like a festival after a great victory. My wife squeezed my hand, her eyes glinting with quiet pride, though her cheek still bore the faint red mark of that slap. I kissed it gently, not for show, but the neighbors saw anyway, and the gesture only deepened their applause. To them, the fight was already legend, something they'd tell and retell over patio dinners and driveway gatherings for years to come. But the story wasn't done. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder until a patrol car rolled into the Cull D. Sack, its lights painting the houses in red and blue. The crowd hushed, parting instinctively, as if the arrival of real authority demanded ceremony. 2 officers stepped out, hands on their belts, scanning the scene. One of them bent down to pick up a shard of the broken clipboard, turning it over with a smirk. "All right," the officer said, his voice carrying easy humor. "Who wants to explain why half the neighborhood is out here cheering like it's fight night?" The neighbors erupted into overlapping accounts, voices tumbling over one another in their eagerness to spill the tale. They slapped his wife. Fake badges, officer, totally fake. He dropped, kicked one right into the bushes. The officers raised their hands laughing, trying to calm the storm of testimony. Finally, the taller officer gestured toward me. "Sir, you want to give us the straight version." I stepped forward, calm as ever, water bottle still in hand. 2 men showed up pretending to be HOA enforcers. They assaulted my wife. I encouraged them to leave. That was all. No embellishment, no bravado. Just truth delivered plain and steady. The officers exchanged a look, one brow arched, and then both chuckled. Sounds like they left in a hurry. "They did," I said. "Well," the shorter officer replied, grinning as he tossed the clipboard shard aside. "Guess that's one report we're happy not to write." Laughter rippled through the crowd again, tension dissolving completely. The officers lingered a while, taking statements from the neighbors, but their tone stayed light, like they were humoring the formality rather than hunting for crimes. By the time they left, the Cull D. Sack was alive with chatter and laughter, the legend already being polished and stretched with each retelling. As the last patrol car rolled away, the neighborhood slowly returned to itself, lights flicking off, doors closing, kids being ushered inside. My wife and I stood in the driveway a moment longer, the night quiet around us, the roses glowing faintly under the porch light. She touched her cheek, no longer tender, and looked at me with that smile I knew so well. "They'll never live this down," she whispered. "No," I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders as we headed back inside. "But they'll think twice before they ever touch another rose bush." And just like that, the Cull D. Sack returned to peace. Though beneath its stillness, a new truth had taken root. This neighborhood had a guardian, and the legend of that night would grow with every telling,